Hello, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about a highly contentious debate that's happening in the Western world, and I'll give you my thoughts on why it is a good thing that this behavior should persist. And that is, of course, as you can guess by the title, the act of bullying. In a larger social context, the social interactions we have with one another are not just out of random chance, it's not relative to culture per se. A lot of the behaviors that humans have come out of naturally selected traits and behaviors that have allowed us to survive on this planet for a very long time. So a lot of the social conditioning, a lot of the behaviors we have, how we interact with one another, have been almost, you could say, designed by nature to allow us to exist. And social pressure is a very important thing. And when I say social pressure, I mean you have an out group that's outside of the individual, family, friends, society as a whole, that puts pressure on you to act in a specific way. And it's subconscious a lot of times, but the pros almost always outweigh the cons. And so we're going to talk about bullying in particular with young children, and then I'll give you my experience growing up, because I think the context of my life is important to understanding my feelings towards this as well. So let me clarify something right off the bat before I get a lot of angry comments. I'm not saying that you should teach your kids to go out there and bully people or be physically abusive to other people. However, the natural tendency for human beings to establish hierarchies within their social groups is perfectly natural and is necessary to create these social dominance hierarchies that are so very important in our social interactions. And there's many different types of bullying as it's defined by the pansies and the pussies of today. Simply talking with someone in an offensive way can be constituted as bullying, which is bullshit. Banter is an incredibly important part of social bonding between one another, especially males. And if you remove men's ability to banter with one another, you remove their ability to be not only truthful, but close with one another. Because the bonding that happens between men, and this is for a reason, is not forged in this pansy-prissy attitude. It's forged with blood and iron. In order for men to truly bond and trust with one another, their experience and interactions must be pretty harsh. Because you can't truly know the intentions or actions or behaviors of another man if you don't know how he's going to act when he's put under social pressure or if he's put in a dangerous situation. And no, I don't mean you need to, scare your friends by shooting at them or trying to fight them all the time. That's not what I mean. Men play rough with one another. They talk a lot of shit to one another. This is an essential part of the bonding process between men, because if you are going to allow another man into your society, you have to know that he has fortitude. If someone cries because you call him a fag, he's obviously not strong enough to enter your social circle. And this is very important if you want to weed out the weak, because if you don't weed out the weak, then you're going to have a society full of weak men, which is exactly what we're seeing today, because we have not allowed enough of this natural social bonding to occur between men. And this is why I think bullying at a young age is something that everyone should deal with, because it increases your fortitude, especially if you're trained appropriately by your parents to handle it. If you understand why it happens and you fight back and you push your will towards it, it makes you stronger as a person. And the world is not a fair place. It's not going to play nice with you. It's not going to care about your feelings or how offended you are. The world is violent and cruel, and there are violent and cruel people out there who would like nothing better than to just gun you down. And if you're not prepared to deal with that, then we have a serious problem with the men in our society who, by nature, have been designed to deal with the most violence and cruelty that nature has to offer. Another effect that some people don't seem to understand is that bullying does not only affect the person who is being bullied. Again, I'm using bullying, sort of this wide word that covers a lot of different things, but bullying does not just affect the person who is being bullied, it affects the person who is doing the bullying as well. It shows them that there are limits to how they can behave. It keeps sociopaths and psychopaths from acting in a certain way, because they know if they push the limit, if they push someone, if they act in a certain way, they're going to get their teeth knocked out by somebody. And that's what we really need to teach people, is that if you act a certain way, if you act like a sociopath or a psychopath, someone's going to come up to you and knock your fucking teeth out. That's a very important social dynamic that we have not been incorporating into our lives in the past 20, 30, 40 years, maybe, at least in some areas. If you're in a more rural population, you've probably experienced a lot more of this social dynamic than others in more urban environments. And personally, I think this is why we're seeing a lot more weak, limp-wristed men and a lot more psychopaths that are running around, is because neither of them have been taught the social dynamic of humans. No one has ever put them in their place and really told them what it means to interact with society. So let me give you an example from my own life. My parents were pretty weak liberals. I came from a semi-conservative culture, but it really wasn't much. I was taught how to hunt and how to fish and how to survive on my own. Those types of things. I learned how to use tools and how to fix things, but I was never really taught how to interact with other human beings in the social dynamic. So by the time I was in middle school, which is, I believe, between the ages of 11 and 13 or 14 in the United States, I did get some bullying that I didn't know how to react to from the kids who were higher up on the social dominance hierarchy. I didn't know how to deal with it, so I struggled when I was much younger to interact with other human beings. But high school, when I was 14 to 15, entering high school, changed all of that for me and taught me how to interact with people and engage in the social dynamic. So let me tell you why. And I've talked about this briefly before in a video a couple months ago, that when I went to high school, I was one of maybe 5 to 10 white people in the entire school. If you went to my high school, you were either black or Hispanic or a refugee, and the refugees were a pretty small percentage of the population. It was like 50-50 black most of the time. Everyone else was kind of a statistical anomaly as far as I'm concerned, and this really put pressure on me to adapt to this because I was outside of my comfort zone. My life before that had been sort of this standard issue multiculturalism where, whites make up 60% of the population. But now all of a sudden I'm thrust in an environment that's very cruel and very toxic. And if I realized very early on that if I didn't adapt to it, then it was going to eat me alive. Not only was this high school made up of only minorities, but it was also extremely ghetto. It was just horrendously urbanized and toxic. We're talking gangs and drugs, killings. It's in a bad neighborhood. The funny thing was there were rich and poor kids that went there. It was a pretty good mix. I mean, there were lots of poor people and a whole bunch of rich kids that went there too that were all just happened to be minorities. But when you're watching the people who are on the lowest end of the social dominance hierarchy get pushed around and have their things taken from them, and they don't get to eat lunch because the tougher older kids take it from them every day, you begin to realize that if you don't stand up for that, then you're just going to be a target for the rest of your career in that school. And I didn't want to do that. I was not going to be bullied not only because of my race, but because of my, at the time, low status on the dominance hierarchy. Not only because of my age, but because of my stature and how I behaved. I wasn't going to do it. So I changed. I joined a sports team. I started doing multiple sports each semester. I started lifting weights, and it really changed my attitude. And the sort of physical bullying that most people are more familiar with stopped almost instantly because I stood up for myself. And when someone tried to start some shit with me, I didn't take it. If someone tried to take something from me, I would immediately stand up, square up to them face to face, look them in the eyes, maybe physically grab them in some sort of way, and then say what I had to say, and then went and sat back down. And the people who were targeting the weaker kids stopped messing around with me. And that's generally how it is. If you want to survive in this very cruel world that we live in, you're going to have to learn how to have a lot of fortitude, how to be strong. So if you're teaching your kids how to stand up to bullies, you know what you need to do is you need to teach them how to be strong, how to keep their chin up, and how to swing with a heavy fist. And yes, I've had my nose broken several times. I've gotten into a couple scuffles both on and off of campus and even outside of school as I got older, because that's just who I am now. I'm not going to put up with that shit. I'm not going to be a victim. And that mentality led me to rise up on the social dominance hierarchy in life. And it wasn't just even being able to defend myself that this sort of mentality improved, but it also got me out of my comfort zone. It taught me how to talk to people. It taught me how to interact with other people, how to interact with women especially. It taught me interpersonal relationship skills, which is how I got the career that I'm working in today. It has improved my life immeasurably. And this is something that all young men and women need to be taught, that bullying is a natural part of how humans interact with one another to establish social dominance hierarchies, and that if you have cultivated fortitude and strength and willpower, that you will rise up in this dominance hierarchy. And that's one of the fundamental parts of being on the right-wing political spectrum, is understanding this hierarchy and letting it play out as naturally as possible, because that is what has led us to where we are today. How our societies have been able to flourish is understanding this social dominance hierarchy. That's all I have to say for now. Thanks for watching.